Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, in my previous video I've explained to you how our automatic thoughts and mental clutter and how we are being affected by our perception. And what is perception? Perception is what we think of our life, what we think of ourselves. We perceive the world as, for example, being good. We perceive the world as being unfair or unjust. We perceive the world as being corrupted and so on. So those are perceptions. We have thousands of mental models that is linking our perception, all right? And how this affect our anxiety and fear is through our consciousness. So the nature of consciousness I've explained and I have described to you in many of my earlier videos on the nature of consciousness, but I'm going to give you how we can understand anxiety and consciousness, how we can actually heal anxiety with higher consciousness, because there are many approaches towards resolving the problem of anxiety, depression, psychological problems and whatnot that we have within this whole idea of human existence. As long as we live, we will have psychological challenge. That is part and parcel of our life. But how would you resolve this and how we understand this from the understanding of higher consciousness? So I'm trying to give you some idea. These are some ideas that are being done with a lot of research now being done. And in a lot of research, we have understood that from the hippocampus, if you have a signal coming in, it goes to three stages: stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. From the prefrontal cortex, it goes backward. All right, you have then the lag or the time of about 300 milliseconds before you become conscious. So this is the internal mechanism of your brain. All right, this is how it works within the brain. So what are those that affect our brain? As we know, our brain is affected by our neurotransmitters. So we have the three dominant neurotransmitters that we have within us. We have serotonin, okay, we have dopamine, and we have GABA. All right, the relationship between these three will then affect your level of anxiety, in the sense of, if you have very high stress hormone, or your stress neurotransmitter is built in within, that's affecting your lower level of serotonin, dopamine and GABA, this balance is taken into account. And we know that using one approach that is to actually resolve your anxiety is by using, for example, for serotonin, you can use SSRI, serotonin uptakes. These are, all right, drug molecules that is being used to increase your uptake of serotonin. All right. You also have, for example, the uptake of dopamine. How you are going to balance your dopamine? So they have to use the development of the various drugs, especially related to dopamine, and we have then other like TCAs to balance your GABA. All right. For dopamine, they have this benzodiazepines. But these are chemical approach to solving the problem of anxiety. So all these levels will affect the higher your level of serotonin, the lower will be your level of anxiety. So the same thing, if you have a balance of dopamine vis-a-vis serotonin and GABA, you can have no anxiety, very little anxiety. So this is the chemical approach. This is where, as I've told you, this is the in CBT as well as in neurosciences, we use what we call the psychosocial model. All right, so that means you're using chemicals to influence your neurotransmitters, to influence the flow of your consciousness. All right, because this is from the neurological aspect. But we have a higher level of understanding, because if we say this is all, it is not true. Because where does our thinking come from? The hard question, where is our conscious come from? We can understand it existed from an input. So that input, at the higher level, they have this microtubule, all right? Microtubule, tubule that within your brain you have billions of microtubule, and they are working at a higher function of thinking. And within that, you also have, all right, your understanding of how your brain function vis-a-vis the methodology that's now found recently. All right, so this microtubule can affect your level of your neurotransmitters level. Okay, and there also the approach of using stimulation. We use stimulation. We have we have electromagnetism. We have ultrasound stimulation. So you have stimulation approach to affect your brain. So they put sensors in your brain, and then they try to increase the level of serotonin, for example, so that you reduce your anxiety. All right, but all this comes about to one big question. All these are mechanisms using either the biochemical approach, biosocial, or using the microtubule theory of brain function, which links back to epigenetics. It is epigenetics. Genetics, and this theory of microtubule now is getting a bit and a higher level of thinking. All right, and stimulation using electromagnetic, ultrasound, and so on. So these are stimulation devices that you put in your head externally, because you cannot go right into the head. But there are also some other stimulation that they put probe into your brain, especially if you have epilepsy and a lot of the other problems. You are experimenting on that. So you have this approach of changing the chemical component of your brain, especially the increasing serotonin, so that you can reduce your stress. And when you reduce your stress, you have less anxiety. So there is a rule. There's a room for our drug-based medication. We're not saying there is no, because a lot of sciences are coming into this. All right, but there are also this epigenetics approach and the microtubule approach, and how stimulation will affect our perception, and it will affect our mental state, in whether we have anxiety or not. But that begs a bigger question. The biggest question is, all right, with all this approach in terms of the artificial stimulation, what is, for example, the highest level that is higher consciousness? We have higher consciousness. What is our level consciousness? Everything that we see. Because if you take that the brain consciousness reside in the brain, these are the two theories. The Darwinian theory, all right, the materialist theory is that everything is in the brain, all right. But for this universe is a universe of consciousness. Allah created, because Allah, the realm of the absolute, from the realm of the absolute. Realm of the absolute. This is the realm of God, Allah. Fantasies. So intellect and higher consciousness are together. So we call this intellect, the absolute, the higher intellect, or the higher consciousness. This, without higher intellect, Allah cannot do it all. These are all sciences. The ayah, Allah tells us that He is a creator of the neurotransmitter, He's the creator of the brain, He's the creator of the nature of the circuit of consciousness, He's the creator of the epigenetics and the microtubule theory, creator of how when you stimulate your electromagnetism or ultrasound and affect the production of serotonin, dopamine, and so on. But the hardest question is higher consciousness and higher intellect. And this is from the realm of the absolute. Here we do not question, but if we understand that the brain is just a mere receiver. This is brain, our brain is just a receiver. It's receiving all the information, the spiritual information, especially the spiritual information, the emotional information, the mental information, and the physical information. So this information, all right, we are receiving the higher consciousness, all the information that is integrated. This is one whole reference. When we understand this, that from the higher consciousness, we are receiving input from the angelic world, even for the satanic world, the spiritual input that can affect, that can stimulate our existence and can affect and stimulate our level of anxiety. So if we can calm our spiritual, emotional, mental, especially SEM, that we can, using higher consciousness, that means in higher consciousness is ibadah, salah, prayer, meditation, contemplation. This actually affects all. Your level of serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and all the other neurotransmitters is affected by your higher consciousness. So if you can stimulate the higher consciousness to have a positive way of life, to understand that this brain receives information from the all level of consciousness, from the universe, from the realm of the angelic, from the realm of the absolute, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because these are all His sifah. Alright, this metaphysics of Islam is well known. You can study, for example, our Said Naqib Al-Attas, the Metaphysics of Islam, his outstanding book. He explained this nature of the intellect and the higher consciousness. Alright, this is not something new. This is not what I'm telling you. This was the study of the nature of higher consciousness by Muslim scholars 800, 1000 years ago. That we are receiving input from all realm of existence. The realm of the physical, the realm of the mental, the realm of the emotional, the realm of the spiritual. This constitute our consciousness. And the higher consciousness will be the realm of the spiritual, emotional, and mental. And if we can stimulate through meditation, through Asmaul Husna, through remembrance of Allah, then we can reduce and heal anxiety, which is so fantastic. All right? So what I'm telling you is that right now we are beating around the bush using, I'm not saying that it's wrong, it's not right to use, say for example, drugs. Yes, these are there are drugs that SSRI, benzodiazepine, TCAs and all that. That affects your brain function. That gives you a certain level of calmness. Or you can use the epigenetic microtubule, and you can use the stimulation method using electromagnetism, ultrasound, and other method of stimulation to affect, again, your level of neurotransmitters to make it more calm and more balanced. But we have this inner mechanism of higher consciousness, which is innate, natural, and not artificial. And you can access this higher level of consciousness through ibadah, through salah, through meditation, through contemplation, and all that will affect your serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and all your neurotransmitter production. It will affect your level of anxiety. It will bring down your level of anxiety, and you don't need all these things. So here we are in the 21st century, having science, having understanding, having all the so-called ability to understand all these things, but we are beating around the bush. We are not going back to the hard question that we have a higher consciousness, we have a higher intellect, and all this come from the realm of the absolute, that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where He created the universe. He gave this universe a nature of consciousness which Allah will. This is also in the Quran, where Allah wills the universe and how this universe is conscious, and that is a separate study of Islamic metaphysics that we can go into. But as I said, these are very deep questions. But on the outer level, if we begin to understand this higher consciousness of spiritual, emotional, and mental positivity, what are the positive values? Gratitude. Every day we wake up, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, glories to you, Ya Allah. You give me a wonderful life. I have passed on this life, 68 years of my life, and every day you show me your grace, your love, your mercy, and so on. So we have these positive ideas. We infuse the idea of peace, because Allah wants and ordained peace upon us, that our life, even though it go through turmoil and phases of sadness and despondency, but Allah gives us this balance of peace. So Islam is peace. Salam is come from the word salam, so peace. So Allah wants us peace. Allah tells us in the Quran, He is Ghafurul Wadud. So we have a life of forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, and forgiving whatever that is inflicted upon us. And Wadud, Ghafurul Wadud, He is the most loving. And He tells us, for those who believe in Allah, his love of Allah is extreme. Ashaddu bihubbullah. The love of Allah is very deep. So these are higher consciousness. These are understanding that I'm going to tell you that if we can work at this level, then we can reduce, we can heal anxiety, depression, and all our psycho-social problems that we face in this world. As I told you in the previous video of this me world, we must transcend from me to we to all of us, living all connected through this higher consciousness of the realm of the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical, and how we can have peace, happiness, fulfillment, success, and existence. Because at the realm of spiritual, emotional, mental, it is beyond space and time. It is not that physical thing. When your brain dies, it does not die. All right? We live beyond space and time, beyond the quantum state. Now they have this quantum state. Quantum state. All right? There's a lot of research on quantum state now, which affects your nature of consciousness. All right? So there's so many research that is bringing us closer and closer to the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is that Allah is the absolute creator. He is the absolute intellect. He created this universe. He gave consciousness to this universe. And we, as part of this universe, partake in the various levels of consciousness that we can enhance based on the qualities of goodness, the qualities of gratitude, qualities of mercy, compassion, love, peace, tranquility, happiness, fulfillment, achievement, and success. Isn't it wonderful? That is what Allah has ordained for us. It is up to us to search and to understand this higher meaning and how this connection of how we can heal anxiety with understanding of the nature of higher consciousness, inshallah.